All right. Welcome, everyone, to the third episode of Live from the Lab. This week, we are going to be focused in on mutations, a very pertinent topic. I don't know about you guys, but did anyone else have flying reindeer going over their home?
Yeah.
It's like an epidemic of those things recently.
It's
I don't know what's
bad.
up.
I mean, it is insane. So I'm excited to dive in. We're gonna have a format this week. Stay on track. We're gonna go through a few different topics. We're gonna start off by giving you a quick intro to what mutations are. Then we're gonna talk about polyploids, which is when something has more than two chromosomes. Like we're diploid, and you could be triploid, and it's crazy what happens. Bigger fruits. That's how seedless watermelons are created. Then we're going to move into something talked about a little bit more in the news, at least, is GMOs, which we're going to even dive into Monsanto and why there's such concern over it, and on the flip side, what incredible benefits can be offered, particularly to humanity. Next, we're going to cover a third method for mutations. Well, I didn't even know this was possible. It's called epigenetics, which is basically, without altering the DNA sequence, it's an alteration to the expression of DNA that can be passed on or disappear over time. So, and then we're going to close out with patented mutations, talking about how it becomes money, if you have a mutation and what that means for innovation. And then we're going to close out by talking about inducing mutations and then actually trying to do it. So let's kick off with what are mutations. And I'm going to talk to Nick and JT 2.0, Chat JT 2.0. Now, if you were with us last week, JT wasn't available, so we had Chat GPT, who we called Chat JT, answer a lot of questions. We've upgraded to 2.0 this week, right here, much more realistic looking.
I'm not AI though. I am a real person.
Not even a little cyborg?
No, I'm just.
He's real AI.
A real human.
All right.
He's a real human.
If you're a real human, then tell me this.
Yes.
What if I only told JT? What 3 movies have I cried to in the last 2 months?
Last 2 months?
Yeah.
Well, that's a trick question because it was all in 1 week, and you cried about Terminator 2. All Dogs Go to Heaven,
Understandable.
and Twins.
Wow. Okay. Either AI's getting real creepy or that's JT. Look, it touched me the way I always relate to Danny DeVito, and just their relationship was beautiful. Anyways, all right, let's dive in. So let's kick off. What are mutations? So what exactly? So I wrote prompts, and I'm gonna read them off, put some time into them with help with ChatGPT. He helped me fact check a lot. So I'm gonna read a prompt, then we're gonna discuss it a little, dive in, and hopefully answer some questions. So let's start off. What exactly is a mutation? So I thought that when I saw a change in fruit size or a leaf color pattern of a plant, I always thought it was just a change to the DNA sequence itself, a typo in the genetic code. If you think of our genetics as being a story, right? And it's a long string of DNA, what I'm finding is that, I started learning about other things like polyploids where it's multiple chromosomes, or epigenetics that changes the expression of the DNA. What really is a mutant, right? And the way I look at it is like, imagine there's a book that you're reading and you have this real copy of a book that's typed up, and that's the DNA. Now, the way I'm seeing polyploid would almost be like having multiple letters or like redundancies, but I guess more importantly is epigenetics, which is almost like if you read a book that someone had highlighted up and put Post-its in,
Right.
particularly Post-its, because apparently they can be removed often. So
That is a really good way to.
that's the way I'm thinking about epigenetics. So
Yeah.
are these even, let's move to group, see if we can get that up on the screen. Are these mutations, right? What is a mutation? And let's put JT in the hot spot.
Okay. I do work with a lot of mutants and purposeful mutants and gene editing and mimicking these mutations from real life examples. So I guess I'll look into that a lot. Oh, hi.
That's an awkward camera angle, so I'll back it up. You want to put it on the
Is
wide
that
one?
more awkward?
Wide.
Or do you like it like,
Yeah.
there we go.
Yeah. We get an upward shot.
Yeah, so I'm looking down at the
Yeah,
camera.
even. There we go.
So, for mutations, right? Like maybe we move on to polyploids to give an example quickly, but like, is a polyploid a mutation to you? Is epigenetics, like, is that a mutation? And I think I have one happening possibly, and I'll show you guys in a little bit. But yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's hard to say. I feel like it's debated a lot. So with polyploids, normally you have the 2 copies of your genes, and accidents or things happen and it forces them to like have multiple copies. Like with Cletus, there's a crustacean. A Cletus is what's it?
He's a blue lobster from Petco.
Yeah, and they reproduce completely with parthenogenesis, which is the mom makes eggs. All the eggs are fertile without a male. There's no males. And then they all form their own little blue lobsters, and they grow up to be parthenogenic blue lobsters.
It's nuts. And all right, I made a video on triploid. I want to play this for people because this is exactly where this is going. Ready, guys? And we'll see you in a couple minutes. Have you ever heard about triploid plants?
Or wondered how watermelons can be seedless? Well, we are going to dive into the science of polyploids. Inside every cell, plants have tiny packets of DNA called chromosomes. Now, most living things, like you and me, have 2 sets of chromosomes, one from each parent, making us diploids. But when it comes to plants, things can get wild.
Sometimes that number can go from 2 to 3 to 4 to 6 or even 8, and that's called polyploid. Let's dive deeper into that.
Now, before we jump into polyploids, we do need to discuss the minimalist of the group, haploids. These are cells that only have 1 chromosome. While very rare in adult mature plants, they play a critical role in reproduction. Think of a pollen cell carrying a single set of instructions to the next generation.
Most plants are diploid. They have 2 sets of chromosomes, which is perfect for balanced growth and safe reproduction. They are nature's standard.
Now, triploid plants is where it gets very interesting. These cells have 3 sets of chromosomes, which actually makes it really hard for them to reproduce, but gives us incredible things like seedless watermelon.
Now let's keep going with 4 sets of chromosomes. That's a tetraploid. And the most common example you'll hear about is with potatoes. Now, wild potatoes are diploids, but the ones you get in grocery stores, those big tubers, now those are tetraploids because 4 sets of chromosomes means bigger cells and bigger fruits and flowers. Another great example is with daylilies. Those amazing giant blooms are from their tetraploid cells.
And then there's hexaploid. A great example of this is wheat. With 6 sets of chromosomes, this is one of the most versatile crops out there. This robust count of chromosomes gives the wheat an incredible ability to resist heat, cold, drought, and pests, and also increases the range in which the wheat can be grown. Just amazing.
Cool. Finally, let's talk about the giants of the polyploid world, octoploids. My favorite example is strawberries. Those giant strawberries you see in the supermarket, they have 8 sets of chromosomes compared to the much smaller wild versions that you'll find, which are all diploid.
Polyploids aren't just fascinating, they're a driving force in plant evolution. By reshuffling chromosomes, plants can adapt, thrive, and even form entirely new species.
It is one of nature's coolest hacks. So like and subscribe to learn more. All right, and back with our group. Oh, we need to shuffle this camera.
Yeah.
One sec, let's see.
I'll get it.
You got, wait, let me try this guy. Ooh,
right.
That could be the right one. What do you think?
I like that.
Can work.
So, Wega is here.
What's going on, folks?
And we need to get this camera going, but let's just, anyways, let's jump in. All right, and we'll let him intro. He's going to be in charge of Chat JT today, which is awesome.
Just call it chat.
We'll call him Chat.
JT's here in the flesh.
That's Chat JT
Oh,
2.0.
yeah.
We're not so sure he's real yet.
Which one's 2.0?
Yeah, they interrogated
That's
me.
2.0.
That's 2.0.
They don't believe that I'm human.
So all right. So polyploids. Polyploids are organisms with extra sets of chromosomes, more than the usual 2 sets we see in humans and most animals. Having more chromosomes doesn't just make things bigger, it can create entirely new traits or even new species. So why does nature allow some species to thrive with extra chromosomes while others can't handle it? And how does this relate to the food we eat or the plants we grow? I am going to sit back and enjoy you guys having to answer that confusing question. So why? Dude, all right, JT. JT's the guy I'm going to point at for this one. Why do polyploids, do they exist in nature, right? Do you have 4 chromosomes split up, reconfigure, and create new species?
Yeah.
Diploids, are they flashing, for
where does it-
evolutionary purposes?
Where does it happen? Why does it happen?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm personally kind of curious about the idea of multiple chromosomes. It sounds like.
Yep.
And during the process of reproduction, where do the extra chromosomes kind of sit within the cellular anatomy?
Yeah, so I guess Mandy in the video explained it a bit. We have our DNA and it sort of loops up into these little bunches of DNA that are our chromosomes, and each species kind of has its own number of chromosomes, so it's from person to person or animal to animal. They should have the same number of pairs. You get one half from your mom, one half from your dad, and they sort of make up everything that's in you. And you've heard about dominant recessive genes,
Yeah.
and so that comes into play when there's a dominant gene on one of the chromosomes and a recessive one on the other chromosome. Only the dominant one's going to show, but it gets confusing when there's multiples or partial dominance and all that. But where it comes into play in nature, either it can happen with there's a stressor like you're talking about with epigenetics, with certain species, the eggs once they're fertilized, if there's a cold shock, it can make them a haploid and only the mother's genes go in, but it's a full creature with half of the chromosomes.
I mean, here's an example of why it could be concerning. We have this lobster that we got and it's a crayfish, right?
Crayfish,
I
yeah.
forget the scientific name for it, but it's triploids. So normally crustaceans are not in the wild. The
Right.
wild version of it just showed up in a pet store in the 90s. And it can reproduce. We had one, and now we have over 100 here. They've shown up in random tanks, and literally, as an example of why it would be concerning, there's a tank over here, which it literally moved in. One showed up as a baby somehow. I don't even know how it got in there. Some water changed, moved the plant over. And it's a 55-gallon tank, and this little guy destroyed the ecosystem. It was pulling up the roots of plants, just one of them, to the point where then a catfish died because it was so disrupted. I had to move all my fish out and basically reset the tank.
So do all of them come from that one that was found in the
Yeah.
pet store?
And
So the one
in
that
the
you got
wild,
is a descendant of that wild one that just showed up at the
you
pet
only
store.
need one. So think about from an evolutionary perspective, what's the downside, I guess, for that creature?
That creature, I mean,
It can reproduce sexually still? Or would it not? Maybe that's the
I don't
problem.
think it can. I think it's not able to because of the number of chromosomes. When it splits, it has the right number of chromosomes already, so adding another one is going to make it not able to, I believe.
So that you run into some issues with variation, because as we were talking about earlier with the dominant and recessive genes, multiple parents coming together to create a new creature, the amount of variation you can get, it seems like there would be faster adaptations to environmental circumstances versus if you're, is it cloning yourself effectively through this lineage, you're
Yeah.
only going to be able to have access to changes, dare I say mutations, but things that are forced to occur through what was it,
Epigenetics. Yeah.
epigenetics and any other forces that cause mutations, which I'm sure we'll be covering around.
But it's interesting though, like the Cletus can the lobster can self-reproduce. But the whole way, with triploids, a triploid for watermelons is seedless. It can't reproduce.
Right.
So
They
that's
are
what we-
made
okay.
from, I forget, tetraploid split. I don't.
Yeah, because they take
Meaningless.
the parents are
You made it short.
higher number of chromosomes, and then when you get the seed for that, there's half the chromosomes which isn't able to reproduce.
So
Yes.
Is that
So why can lobsters reproduce but the watermelons can't?
It's just the number of chromosomes happen to match up right. Where the watermelons, it's a freak thing where there's so many that when it splits, and also it's a little bit different where they're putting sort of the whole genome into the egg, where those ones, I think it's a cross, causing the extra chromosomes to be in the seed.
All right, so I would love to press this new button I have here. It's called, where is it? Fact check, and it comes with the DJ air horn. We got program that. JT's the man. He bought us a sound deck, which is so amazing. And next week we're gonna have that running, so I'm gonna have a button to do this exact thing. But
I know
anyone
you're
in the
so
audience,
excited for that.
please comment. Oh, it says there's comments. I don't understand. Oh, hey Mandy. Sorry, you weren't seeing that.
Great.
Thanks, Mandy. Oh wait. Oops, I just did the wrong stuff.
So I was just curious with when it comes to Cletus, so all of his genetic line are now also effectively Cletus.
So it takes all of the genes. So the original one had one whole set of chromosomes from dad, one whole set of chromosomes from mom. We think, because it can. I'll talk about salamanders a little bit in a second. But those are all sort of mixed up, and usually when you're making a haploid for your sex genes, you're splitting them and sort of shuffling things, so there's two sets of things in there. So I believe that there's some variation, just not very much, but it's still going down a line where if you had a male and a female, there'd be two sets of more chromosomes and shuffling more, and so there's a lot more variation.
So there is a little bit of flexibility still.
I
there.
think there's a little
Interesting.
bit, but not as much as sexual reproduction. And we should fact check that. I'm not sure about, what is it? What kind of shrimp, crayfish is that?
Let's see. It is a Florida blue crayfish. Oh wow, and it might be related to an episode. I probably shouldn't be the one on the computer like this. Let's see. So we could share the screen like that. I think you'll be able to
Just
see
look
it.
up blue crayfish.
And so that is the blue crayfish, and you get them at Petco, and they self-propagate, and they're probably a concern. I would love to look into this about whether they are concerned as an invasive species, but interestingly, ultimately they have a very limited ability to evolve, right?
Right,
Or a
so-
reduced ability to evolve.
So I guess it would be detrimental if they found like a body of water that was perfect for them, but crayfish aren't there normally, or that similar kind of crayfish aren't there.
Like Matt's tank.
Like the tank, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so fish, it makes sense that aquariums, oh
Yeah.
wow, there's gonna be like an invasive aquarium species, but probably,
There's tons of stuff. I mean, if like even blackbeard algae.
Yep.
I think we were talking about that like maybe last week before. I personally am trying to cultivate it because I need a little bit more life, plant life
Yeah.
inside of my tank, and so I'm just kind of seeing how it goes. But getting rid of that stuff can be a challenge. There's tons of stuff that's like almost impossible to
And
get out
are
of
they
an
all
aquatic
clones?
environment without like annihilating.
that one I think might have to do with pH I've started to find. I've started shifting, but you are acidic. Yeah, well, another time. So, all right, next topic. I'm going to move forward to the next topic.
Well, before we jump to that,
Yeah. Oh, wait.
question is, are blue crayfish all clones? No, blue crayfish are not all clones. While many blue crayfish in the aquarium trade are selectively bred for their vibrant blue color, they are not genetically identical unless they are the result of asexual reproduction or intentional cloning.
Okay. Sorry, I was trying to do that camera angle. All right, we're working on stuff. Pardon us. This is only our third episode, so we can only move the bar up so much every week. We're trying our best. All right. Thank you, Wega. And ChatJT.
ChatGPT.
Oh, ChatJT.
Duck out of your camera here.
I got to say, I really missed 2.0 last week. the real JT.
Oh yeah.
There's nothing like it. All right, so GMOs. Okay, this one's the elephant in the room. So GMOs are genetically modified organisms. What's up, Jeff? These are created through the direct alteration of DNA, which involves adding, removing, or modifying genetic material. Importantly, these changes can be passed down to future generations. Now, on one hand, GMOs hold incredible promise, such as combating global hunger with drought-resistant crops and increasing agricultural efficiencies. For example, in sub-Saharan Africa, drought-tolerant maize, or corn as we call it, varieties have been developed to withstand periods of low rainfall. And since it's a staple food in the region, these crops have helped stabilize yields during droughts and ensure the families have enough to eat, and it reduces the risk and existence of famine. The Water-Efficient Maize for Africa, WEMA project has been instrumental in providing these crops to small-scale farmers. Now, on the other hand, and it's like really far on the other hand, there's a really big controversy around GMOs that a lot of us have heard bits and pieces of, and it's particularly in relationship to corporate practices and the potential for serious health risks for us and the environment. A frequently cited example, the one I hear about the most, and the company that is villainized the most, and for a reason, is Monsanto. They're the company behind glyphosate, which is commonly known as Roundup. It's a widely used herbicide that kills many types of plants, and to actually make it work for farmers and not kill the intended plants to be grown like corn, they developed genetically modified crops that are resistant to glyphosate. And this allows the farmers to use the herbicide without harming their corn crops, assuming they're using Monsanto seeds. Now, the critics argue that this creates a dependency for farmers, as they must purchase both the patented seeds and the herbicides year after year because, of the toxicity levels in their soils from the glyphosates and whatnot. Furthermore, when pollen from these patented crops drifts into neighboring fields, the resulting seeds, so say it's an organic farmer next door, may contain Monsanto's patented genetics, and so when they go to use their own seeds, Monsanto has been known to sue these farmers for planting those seeds, even if farmers had no intention or want to be growing them. And perhaps to me at least, the most concerning are the accusations that glyphosate is a carcinogen, a serious one. And Bayer, which acquired Monsanto in 2018, and then 2 years later in 2020 settled for around $10 billion over claims that glyphosate causes cancer, still continues to assert that it is safe when it's used as directed. Now, the truth of the matter is the CDC did a study, and they found detectable traces of glyphosate in the urine of over 80% of 2,310 people tested. So that's terrifying. That includes children, and to me, it's concerning. So on the flip side, though, we talked about the potential for good. So are GMOs a powerful tool for good, or a tool for evil, or something in between, or both?
I think it sounds good until, our good old friend corporate greed gets involved.
Want to join in, bud?
Yeah, I am going to jump in because I think trying to make it binary and say that is it good or is it evil is an incorrect approach, because anything can be used for good or for evil. Right. Nuclear power is wonderful because it's relatively clean and it's very efficient. But
Nuclear.
Actually,
I'll have you sit here.
Yeah, you can't really put a binary on it. Plus, I mean, I think, when you say good and evil, like there's a lot that has to do with intent, and it's kind of a loaded term. I think helpful or unhelpful, helpful or detrimental would probably be a better way to structure the thought.
yes, and yeah, I mean there are a lot of good uses, a lot of beneficial uses that could help all people.
It sounds awesome, right? Like the idea of like, hey, we have effectively a targeted, what's the word I'm looking for? Herbicide type deal, or pesticide, and you can actually make the plants like immune to that. That sounds on its surface really, really useful. But it's true. It's like, what are the longer term consequences of that? Even we've touched on a few. The idea of like lawsuits based on like pollination, that is a huge challenge. I would say, because there's no intent there. And is
it the glyphosate that's the real problem, or is it the GMO? Because they're going to use the glyphosate either way. It's just going to kill some people's plants. Like, I don't
Right.
know. Like,
It's
I
definitely
agree.
multiple.
I think the spread of pollen, right? Like there should almost be counter lawsuits in my mind.
yeah, like you
That's
for-
fair.
Like I don't
you
want
knocked up my corn.
your pollen to be knocking up my corn.
And-
I mean,
'cause
you
I
know,
don't
in the
want my
cannabis
glyphosate-
industry, that's a
glyphosate.
big deal.
Absolutely.
Right?
If you have one male plant and for a square mile around you in any direction,
Oh,
if it
yeah.
you can pollinate anything around you. So
Yeah,
it's
so
a
they
very
should
big
get more
deal.
control
You
of
know what? A
the
fence needs to be two ways, right? Like at the end of the day, right? If there's going to be complaints about using that pollen, should also be control your pollen.
And are the people that are planting their own seeds using the glyphosate because they aren't intending to use the GMO plants that are resistant? So really, if only some of their plants are resistant, all of their crop would die if they're using glyphosate.
On the flip side, and this is going to need some fact checking, right? I remember reading a book about a decade ago about how basically European influence has reduced the ability for GMOs to be used that could be allowing for more food production in places where there are 6 million children dying of starvation annually, over nearly like I think it's 2/3 of a billion people who are starving to death in the world, right? And like cancer is a concern always, but there's no validation on GMOs causing them, and yet there are people dying right now.
I mean,
you
the
know? And
reality
so
of
it's
it
like
is-
that's apparently there's been like a European influence in Africa to reduce their ability to utilize GMOs in many countries, and that's leading to starvation ultimately, right?
I mean, the reality of it is you need different farming practices, and that goes against the principles of these companies and what they're trying to do. They're trying to mass produce as much food as possible, right? But if we change our farming practices and we don't need as much of the herbicides and pesticides because people are actually picking weeds on their farm and, actually acting like real farmers instead of trying to mass produce as much as possible. We don't have the time to pick the weeds because we got to grow, and it doesn't work. If you
It
change the
doesn't.
farming practices and
You're
go
right.
back to more organic farming styles outside, or even you could use some pesticides if you want, but be cognizant of the people that are around you, where the water is.
100%, yeah.
I also think that, when it comes to things that aren't settled science, like GMOs, I think they really need to be a light touch. Like if you're doing something where you're trying to, solve a problem that already exists, great. But if you're manufacturing a problem and then solving it, I mean, that just seems like you're tinkering,
I agree with you completely. If you're trying to grow a stronger seed, grow a hardier crop, that benefits us all. It's a beautiful thing.
And to your point,
But
I
it
can
doesn't need to be resistant to a pesticide.
I can speak
That's
to this
not,
personally,
that's
right?
your point earlier, right? That's not the point. The problem may be the pesticide, not the crop.
Well, in this whole, like, if you're using it, the thing that bugs me is, like, the claim that, like, well, people should be using it properly. But if you know they're not,
And
if you know
can
80% of all people have it in their urine, like, and it's not, then it's your responsibility to make sure they are. And
But what
I've
is
had
proper?
people come to my
You
store
can drink and drive properly.
and tell me that, like, hey, listen, you should sell this. And I'm like, that's a carcinogenic product. I don't want to sell that chemical. And there's argument, well, I can make that decision on my own. But it's like, yeah, but if there are children
Right.
that
You
are
can
around
make
you,
That's
they
my
don't
question.
make that
What's
choice.
proper?
And you get to
Nor
make
do
the
the
decision whether you
consumers
want
of-
to sell it.
Yeah, true.
I mean, that's the flip side of it. I mean, you see this all the time with other things. Like people were using over-the-counter cold medicines to make drugs, and so they made it harder for people to buy bulk cold medicines because people are using it incorrectly. Like when people start mistreating something on a large enough scale, I mean, there are supposed to be systems that kind of counteract that. And I mean, obviously, people can still get Sudafed and still manufacture things, but it's harder than it was, and putting up those barriers.
Dude, Monsanto's history is wild.
Oh,
They were
they-
responsible for Agent Orange.
Yeah,
And,
they've done a lot of
and
questionable
Saccharin,
things.
like the product in Diet Coke. And what other stuff did they do? Yeah, I was like, whoa, they have a long history of chemicals and.
But like, if we could use like genetic engineering to make plants resistant to the pests rather than to the pesticide,
You know what I'm saying?
then
Same
we
work,
would
different
eliminate
purpose.
the carcinogen.
Also,
100%.
that's it's also not the only like GMO thing that as far as when I first heard about GMOs, I was under the impression that most of it was geared around increasing yields, as like kind of the primary and being able to uptake more nutrients and go through the soil faster and preserve it. But even there, what are you targeting? Like, are you just getting more sugar into the system? Like, what about your other nutrients? How does that
That's-
affect nutrition?
Well,
Nutrition
there's
really good.
things around like pest resistance, but then there's pesticide resistance, which is what you're talking
Well,
about.
Yes.
and in Asia, there's I forget what country it is, but there's a deficiency in vitamin B, and so they genetically engineered this rice to produce thiamine. So they're increasing the rice's vitamin B. It makes it yellow, which is it's like a really bright
Yeah,
yellow.
golden rice.
That's
I agree
great.
about it.
Yeah, so they made it so that it's healthier for their population that's consuming
It's
it.
beta carotene, right?
Beta carotene.
Might
That's
be a
it, I'm
fact
sorry, I
check.
thought-
Everyone
I
needs
don't
more B
remember.
vitamins, man.
Fact
That's yellow.
check.
Gotcha.
Where's the fact check?
Right. It looks like we have there's a couple comments as well.
Oh yeah, it's Mandy and Sean chatting about Christmas. Hi guys. I'm out of the picture still. I think that's okay. It's probably better that way.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
changes like that sound like, that really has a lot of potential for the future, especially when we're looking at like, the nation's nutritional profiles,
Yeah.
And all the issues that come with things like, obesity, for example, your protein ratios, your how much you're getting of what, and being able to add a change, where you're increasing your vitamin intake.
Imagine if you didn't have to eat limes to not get scurvy. You could eat something else.
Oh no, I haven't had my
Limes are so
lime yet
delicious.
today.
Limes are amazing. Golden rice is genetically modified to produce beta carotene, which is not normally present in rice. Beta carotene is converted into vitamin A when metabolized by the human body.
Cool.
One of your fat-soluble vitamins, so you can overdose.
All right, should we move on to
Yeah, that's
the
another downside of that there.
Don't eat too much of it.
next topic? What do you guys think? We can always, and when we get back in the lab, we can dive back into some of these conversations. I like Commander in the background of me. That's great.
Right
yeah.
behind you.
Oh wait, that way. That
Yeah,
way.
I've been dodging that camera
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah. All right. So, anyways, guys. Oh boy. So I'll just do this way because otherwise I'm gonna get so distracted. All right. Let's get on to the next topic, which is epigenetics, and this absolutely blew my mind when I learned about it. So, epigenetics is a way genes can be turned on or off without changing the actual DNA itself. Now, these changes can sometimes be passed down to future generations, which blew my mind. It was in contrast to everything I thought about DNA. Or it hasn't changed DNA, it changes genetics. And in humans, a famous example of this is the Dutch famine, where women who were malnourished during pregnancy had children who were more likely to develop health issues like diabetes and heart disease later in life, as it related to shocks to their metabolic system. Plants also use epigenetics to adapt, which is really interesting. For example, when plants experience drought, they can adjust how their genes work to survive with less water. And the crazy part is these changes are actually passed down often to their offspring, making future generations better at handling drought, even though their DNA stays exactly the same. So how can something like this be inherited without actually changing the DNA? It challenges what many of us think we know about genetics. And scientists have found certain markers on DNA, like tags or switches, like methylations and histamines, I believe, right? That can control how genes behave, and their markers can stick around and be passed on, allowing plants and animals to adapt to their environment in ways we didn't fully understand before. So this opens up the question, or a few questions actually. How long do these changes last? Like, are they forever? What does it mean for how life evolves? And to me, like, is this how niche genetics survive through tough, short periods of time?
So I think ultimately it saves the plant or the creature energy from not utilizing those pieces of DNA. And do you know how it works?
No.
So
Well, a little bit.
I might know, but so I definitely need clarification. But when things are passed down, right? It's not just the DNA; it's the entire cell structure, right? It's a cell that ends up dividing. So there are interpretation routines, as far as I'm aware. So like things will scan your DNA and generate RNA from those readings, which are effectively the machines that are controlling the cell processes. And I am not sure how those are indexed, but I could see, even if the DNA is not changing, if the RNA is able to restructure, I don't want to jump on your temperature thing prematurely,
Yeah.
but if there is some active force that changes those, interpretation pieces, I could see them like changing the segment that they're paying attention to when they're building each other.
Yeah, so the RNA sort of the strand of DNA is there, and the RNA is going down it, shooting off little things to make proteins. And the way that the DNA is structured, instead of actually just being a straight line, sometimes there's like loops in there, and so it would go from reading, loop, that it ends up skipping that loop because it's not in the line, and the line
Oh, that's
keeps,
interesting.
Whoa.
so it keeps going over it, and then there will be another loop, and the loops can be different sizes, and depending on what the trigger is, there can be things like a chemical reaction or an enzyme that ends up breaking that loop and straightening the whole thing out. So then
Oh.
instead of skipping over that loop that was previously not read, it will go through the whole thing and read off that new protein that it needs.
So, so this whole process actually changes the shape of the DNA.
Yeah, so the
Yeah,
DNA,
sounds-
when it's in the nucleus and not being used, it's you can read it as like all the base pairs down the line, but there's other things that are sort of the way it's shaped that forces it to like connect in these loops rather than just be a whole straight line the whole time.
So almost like when I try to tie a bow for a Christmas present and it just turns into a mess.
Yeah.
Like the RNA is just like, okay, I'm just going to ignore this part because it is a mess. But once you tug it and get it, cleaned up, then it can go straight across.
Talk, we gotta get closer to the mic, bud. Got a little thing I can pop on top of that thing too.
Excellent.
Will do. All right, cool.
They use it for research a lot because you can, when you're inserting genes, you can attach them to these things that we know cause those loops, and we have ways that we know make those loops open. There's several different ones that are utilized, so if you want to do multiple different genes that are activated in different ways, you give them these different chemicals that normally they're not exposed to, but in nature something might cause them to have this expressed. So you attach that to a gene that you want in there, and then if you don't want it expressed, say it's like lethal at a certain life stage, but you want them to be a certain age older, you can make it expressed later by exposing them to that chemical where they'll survive where they wouldn't have previously. Or if you just don't want it to be expressed for whatever reason, but you can cause it to be expressed by giving a chemical, and then it pops that DNA open, and now that mutation that you inserted is expressed.
That's absolutely wild. Like this idea where, you could have multiple genes inserted into a cell and be able to control which ones are currently active. Like that's really cool.
Yeah. It's crazy what people think of.
I'm reading a layman's term here for what you guys are talking about. It says that epigenetics doesn't rewrite the instructions of the DNA, it just changes how and when those instructions are read. It's like temporarily changing the settings on your phone without installing a whole new operating system. The changes can be reversible, making it a safer way to experiment with gene behavior.
That is really cool. I had no idea that was even
Yeah.
something that could be done. That's crazy stuff.
A lot of the time they connect it with like those jellyfish proteins that glow under black lights. So you can, instead of like doing DNA tests every time you do a different thing, you can just shine a black light and say, oh yeah, it's red, so it's working.
I've heard of that. Like you can sequence in the colors, so you can see like which ones it's present in.
Yeah.
Especially, I guess, if you have like multiple parents, two parents, I should say, instead of one. So you don't necessarily know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
But having that ability to see easily what's there and what's not.
So I want to show you guys actually. Let's move to the phone. That's cool.
No.
And
yeah.
I am actually going to switch over because I think we go for a little bit of a tour. Let's switch the microphone to this for. We're switch it back after. Field trip time. Woo! And I want to show you guys some stuff that I'm interested in. There are some genetics that are mutations. One that I'm particularly interested in that I found, and it started showing this really cool half moon pattern. JT, this is what I was asking you about earlier. Let me put this in that thing. Yeah.
Do you have your mic?
We're just, that's the mic right now. Tell me, so, let's see. Get the light a little brighter. There we go. So check this out. JT, I want to show you this. So don't know if you guys can see this, but so I bought this plant, and I split it up, and it was originally, the only leaves I was seeing looked like this guy. And, you know, very pretty plant. I forget what type of plant this is. I lost the tag. If anyone out there knows, please tell me. And then I noticed one little branch coming out from the roots that had these half moon patterns. Now, I don't know what I did wrong. Everyone else seemed pretty happy on this table. It started getting close to death and started recovering. And its newest growth now is all these only yellow leaves, right? So is this epigenetics? Is this going to continue on? What am I seeing? It's just an expression that, like if I clone that, I don't even know how it would survive.
I don't think the white one would survive. I think it's relying on the rest of this for its sugar.
Yeah.
I'd have to look into how these what are they called? Variegated plants work. I think sometimes they're chimeras, where it's an albino sort of mushed up with a regular one, and that's just how all the cells are. Or
Can you talk about like what a chimera is? I'm just kind
Yeah.
of curious.
or it may be like, you know how there's calico cats, where they're like orange and black. Is that the calico? I think that's calico. They're orange,
Black,
and
and white.
yeah,
And only females.
only the females, because there's co-dominance
Yeah.
or co-expression of both genes at the same time, with the black and the orange and the white. So it's probably like part of the chromosomes. Someone actually online probably already knows this, so we can ask chat. But I think sometimes it's partial dominance, and sometimes it's chimerism, where there's two full individuals in one plant. So
Two full individual chromosomes?
two full individual sets of chromosomes. So one half of the cells have all of the chromosomes of, say, like me and you got mushed into one person.
That's where the chimera is.
Yeah,
Okay. Now we know. Chimera.
chimera.
So it's,
So it's half goat, half snake, half
but it's
wild.
like just a
Yeah,
mix of
that's
cells.
the classic.
You're saying of two different plant cells that are expressing outward.
Yep, and they don't fight each other, so they end up both being expressed at the same time wherever they happen to lie in that individual.
That's nuts.
It's like when a twin's absorbed in the womb.
So I was told in something I read, and I would love, this is a snow, what type is this? This is called a snow snow queen, I'm sorry. And I read that these are actually polyploids, they thought. In others, I think this might also be a polyploid, which is interesting. Then again, I guess you can figure that out. You could dissect. Yeah, how would you figure it out, whether something's a polyploid in a lab? Is that an easy thing to do?
In a lab, you would have to probably do a DNA extraction. Then you can actually look. It's easier than like sending it out for genetic testing. You can just do like a run a gel and do electrophoresis. So it pulls you color the DNA, and then you pull it down this gel, and you can sort of see all the chromosomes and where they lie in there. And either they'll
What's that
be,
called? PCR? No, it's not.
Well, PCR is a little different, and that's doing like a liquid test, and it reacts if there's a specific protein present.
Okay.
Um,
This is so you're selling.
It's like Western blot, I think.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm bringing back
Yeah.
Well,
High school.
literally more than
yeah.
I did college.
Yeah.
What was it, biochem maybe?
Probably
So
biochem,
30 years ago.
Yeah, you put it
Like
in
I
this
remember this gel
electric
thing you're talking about.
Yeah, you make wells in it. It's like jelly, basically, similar. And then you put holes in it, and then you put like the DNA that you extracted into the wells of all the different things that you want to check.
I feel like it's so important. It's funny, like plant breeders, at least home plant breeders, people aren't doing it in labs directly, are often unaware of what they're even dealing with from a mutation perspective or plant trait perspective, and understanding those things might help be more efficient with your breeding processes. I know triploidy is becoming a bigger topic more and more. So,
Yeah,
any
so
other
the chimera,
yeah.
variegated are usually chimeras.
Wow.
according to chat.
Fascinating. Fascinating. I wonder, because the reason why I thought it seemed like a stressor is what triggered that guy, but that could also be this other one. One of the
And maybe
cells is better.
Yeah, maybe the one that was white also was resistant to whatever that stress was, so it's the only part that survives.
What if there's too much light?
Yeah.
Let's focus. Any other, before we go back to the lab and start actually doing stuff, anything else you want to show people in here?
Well, this is one of the patented mutants.
I have one over there.
This is the ZZ Raven.
I believe it was bred, it was, so this is one of those ones, nature, this was bred naturally, someone found this, Costa, I guess,
Yeah,
has
Costa
licensing
Farms.
for it, and they produce it, and they brought the cost down, which is cool. It still costs more than a traditional ZZ, so it's like, if you find something like this in nature, do you have a right to patent it?
And how did they come across it, or did they make it happen, or did they just happen across it?
Yeah. Cool. So, should we get started quickly? I think, unless there's anything else you wanted to.
Well, so you can induce polyploids or haploids in plants with different methods, and depending on, well, sometimes it's mutations that happen. Sometimes it's well, there's a species of salamander that it reproduces like Cletus does, and it has three separate species of salamander. All of their chromosomes are completely present in this one, and that is why it can produce with parthenogenesis, but it's from crossbreeding. Like, you know how
So it would be like being half man, half bear, half pig?
yes, yes, it's the man bear pig of salamanders.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, South Park.
Yes.
That was actually the first time I ever thought that could be logically used in a conversation.
I actually whispered it to Nick. while
Did you
guys were
really?
talking, yeah.
Oh
I mean,
man.
That's,
That-
I mean-
where you guys should find a better live stream. Everyone in the audience. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. But that's how you bring it to reality.
Yeah, it's true. That's how I relate to science.
Yeah.
Funny jokes.
But like, if you did that with a horse and a donkey, you get infertile mule.
Mm-hmm.
So crossbreeding can cause a whole new species to develop and be its own thing that reproduces in its own way.
It's true, right? Like a male horse and a female donkey produces. It's one. Is it the female? No, that produces one animal that is sterile, but apparently it's belligerent and
Yeah.
small. But then if you do a female horse with a male donkey, it's where you get mules, and it's like a stable, large,
Strong.
even-keeled animal. It's like all the best traits, fascinatingly.
Wow, so I was unaware that the mule distinction, depending on the parentage, caused that much of a change.
Isn't that nuts?
Yeah.
I remember that from ANSI 100. One second, I think that's mine. All right, cool. So you want to start doing this? Well, we can start setting up shop.
Yeah, so I brought some stuff to make.
Yeah, or do you want? Yeah, if we want to go over there.
Make some haploid plants rather than diploid, which is how you usually you produce seeds or you do tissue culture. You get diploids, which has 2 sets of chromosomes. We're going to try to do haploids, which you can, with plants, you can sort of, some of them, you can get their sex cells to produce full plants out of them, and they'll be just half of the chromosome, but a full plant that's alive.
Give you this mic back, and we can all chill, I guess, again.
Yeah.
Off this one. Well, yeah, you can just leave it right there if you want, and maybe in front of JT we can use that one because he'll probably need to focus.
Yeah,
on
this
it.
would be a great cam for that.
Cool. A little low. Oh, that's great. That's great.
I'm gonna move this just so that we don't contaminate it.
Maybe even
I think I'm gonna do this in the still air box. Do we have a way to?
Yeah. Should we take those guys out?
Yeah.
Okay. camera we want? Yeah, this is the right camera, right? Here, JT, I might put this guy. Maybe we'll put this, if we're doing this in the still box, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, put that right there. Everyone in the audience, let us know.
Yep.
Do you have any sterile pipettes?
Yeah, box right there.
It's empty.
Really?
You let me use it too long.
Cool. I'll go grab some. I know someone who sells those. Probably out of stock.
Did you want to move these mushroom things out of here?
Grab this too. Oh, that's not going anywhere. Never mind.
A little closer now. Does this stand? I can put it on the table. Does these legs go smaller? Just to this size, maybe? You just put it right on the table.
In theory,
JT, while you're prepping, you need a few minutes? Or do you want to talk while you're doing it? Because we can cover a couple topics.
Yeah, why don't you guys cover a couple topics while I set this up?
All right, cool. Gentlemen, come on back and we're going to talk plant patents.
You want to switch from this one?
I got that. Yeah, I'll do that. Or do you want to do that? Yeah.
There you go.
Flip that guy.
Yep.
however
Very
we
good.
want it.
Thanks, dude. Nice. I like that angle. Precious. These cameras.
Little camera focal issue, yeah.
Oh god, that thing's the worst. There we go. There we go. You might want to maybe tip it a little more this way. See if we can get in there.
Now we're working against each other.
Oh, are you sitting down? or-
Yeah, I'll sit down. I was pushing it this way. Going
Oh, really? I don't want to cut you out. All right, we're back. Sorry about the temporary. So yeah, let's dive in. While JT's getting set up, we are going to talk about patented mutations, like my ZZ Raven here, which JT gave me probably 3 years ago, and there was a point. Oh, look, a third sprout's coming out. Check that out. Can you guys see that? I don't even know if you can see it. So I had this plant. It was just this guy right here for 2 years. It did nothing, no growth at all until it actually shot another sprout out and I knew it was a real plant. Now it's coming with the third one. But anyways, we are going to talk about patented mutations like that. The patents, they can drive progress, right? That's a way for you to protect an invention you have. You usually have 20 years on a patent, but copyright's longer. But long story short, it's a government's protection to you for releasing information or some novel thing you've created. And it can drive progress, but it also risks limiting access or creating dependencies. And balancing innovation with accessibility is a critical challenge, particularly for farming in the future. GMOs, like those mentioned earlier, involve intentional mutations and are often patented to protect the investment of their development. But even natural mutations discovered or selectively bred over decades, like this ZZ Raven, can also be patented. Patents incentivize innovation because without them, who would invest time and money into breeding and GMO research? Well, we would probably, but we're not having more than $50 to put into that. So for an organization to put some real money into it, they need some financial return down the line. Otherwise, only governments and large institutions would do it. Where do we draw the line? Should naturally occurring traits be treated the same as lab engineered GMOs, or should there be no patents on plants?
I think if something's a naturally occurring phenomenon, then it shouldn't be something that you can patent. Yeah, great, you can discover it, but
Like, how many generations of breeding? How long should you have to breed? Because I feel like, I've heard a little bit, especially, like cannabis industry with patenting, it's a new space. So if you ultimately found someone else's breeding project and then to do one generation crosses and now you've patented it, are you the one who deserves it, or should you have responsibility for 20 generations, 20 years worth of development?
Everything leading up to that.
Yeah, like how, where's
like
the line?
There's always evolution. There's always evolution in any game, from music to art to crops to anything. There's always going to be some evolving on the generation that came before.
Yeah, and a lot of it's going to be subjective. Like if I take a Ferrari and I put new hubcaps on it, I can say, look, I just designed a
Right,
beautiful car.
exactly.
But did I really? But what if I took a Ferrari and took everything but the base frame and rebuilt something completely different on top of it? I'm still using their frame. Is that now a new creation? And it becomes very subjective. You can't, it's really hard to draw a line.
So I remember the first Teslas, right, where literally they would take, to your point, and I think this was definitely innovative, took Lotuses, like Lotus race, you know, like
Yeah, the old
vehicles,
sports cars,
and
yeah.
basically smashed tons of computer batteries inside them and wired them up. And I remember getting a tour once around in 2010 and asking the guy there, you know, about competing with Prius. He was like, we're trying to compete with Ferrari. I was like, oh, that's cool. That's different. That's smart.
I knew a guy
But
who
like,
did
is
that
that
to a
innovation?
BMW
You know,
by himself.
combining. You know, to me, it was one of the most innovative
Yeah.
things we've seen
Exactly,
in the
but
last
I mean,
couple decades.
you can find people who will say, well, this looks like a Lotus. This isn't something new. And those people will say, no, it's not.
It's
innovation.
it's fun.
Yeah, it's subjective.
It does stifle the little guy sometimes. I feel like even me, I love doing breeding projects, right? And I, like, for instance, I would be messing with this Raven ZZ and breeding it, but I'm like, I don't want to try. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I can only grow one shoot every 2 years, so that's going to take me a long time. But more so, even if I was successful at it, there's a fear to even like continuing to build upon this. Because
I think it's all tied into like our previous conversation, right? What's your purpose? What are you trying to do this for? You know, it's is this John Deere running farmers out of rebuilding their own tractors because of IP?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or is this a reinvention of the tractor that makes it easier to mechanize and work with? And so what are we doing here? What's your purpose? What's the goal? And I think that's really where we get it kind of gets muddled up, right?
Yeah, a
So
lot of
very
it
much
has
so, yeah.
the conflict of interest just surrounding the monetization can be really touchy because, like, you know, as you're saying, if you want like investors to, you know, give you the funding to do the project, then, you know, they need to have some sort of assurance that they're going to make money off of it in the longer term. And so it does kind of stifle that, like, the open source software concept stuff.
I mean, I look at the world as a creative, though. Like, I think music, art, all of that should be free. It's the artists that should be celebrated, things that should be paid for, right? These are the things that you can't create what somebody else does. You can't. There will not be another Picasso. There won't be another Basquiat. There won't be another, you know, Biggie Smalls.
It's true.
You know what I mean? Only one person can do those. We can all emulate. We can try. We can do different things, but.
And to your point, right? Like you think about music, right? Like at the end of the day, no one's made wild. Like if you make crazy leaps from previous musicians, right? Like, you know, your music's gonna be too weird for people to even appreciate, right? It's not even, you know what I mean? So like we are all
some
inspired.
might get it, though.
I mean, we're using the same
Yeah.
tools, the same concepts, same beats. You know what I mean? Like it's not all that. Every musician,
I think
every
that's how
artist
you
finds
create
tons
new
of inspiration,
genres.
right?
I think that's
Yeah,
how you
like
create
it-
new genres.
Yeah.
If someone came along and decimalized the octave system and changed it from an 8-note scale to a 10-note scale, that would be bizarre, and that would be hard to wrap our heads around.
It made it sound
Eastern music.
good. Yeah, that's true. They have crazy half steps and stuff. That's cool.
Quarter steps.
Quarter steps.
It's just what our ears are used to, what you've grown up with, but other places have different, you know.
It's true, but you know, you get your inspiration as an artist, right? Like always, right? Like, I think in music, right? You know, tons of probably some of the best musicians get no credit, and someone takes it and makes it pop and mainstream and gets all the credit for sound, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's good. There's only so many, you know, musical sequences that you can create. You know,
Yeah.
I guess I was talking to somebody a long time ago, and effectively their philosophy is that everything has already been written. You're just kind of remixing what's out there. And like, even if you come up with something completely new, like notationally, like some classical composer back in,
I don't
you know, the
think
1700s.
creatives believe that. I think creatives know it's a thing, but we don't. It's like, I have to think I can create something new. I have to think that I can come up with something completely different.
Well, and it is
You know,
new
it's
and it's different to you as well, and it's a lot of
But
it
I
is the
think you
context
create
between
something
how
really
you're
different. Right.
All
how
right,
you're
now-
arranging things and the emotional content.
But
There's,
in
like,
the
lots
science
of-
world, what if I would told you something like this?
It's
This
not
is
as
like
dry.
for agriculture, right? If I was like, look, if you give me $1 billion, right? Like, I'll be able to create something. Here's the irony of it, right? Always with this sort of thing is if it takes $1 billion, and I'm like, I'm going to create a drought-resistant crop. Please, I need $1 billion to do this. Well, there's a really good risk it's not going to happen. Let's say it's 1 in 10 you actually succeed, right? So even if I give you 10, you know, unless you make $10 billion, I'm not going to really make anything off because 1 in 10 chance, right? And then it takes time, and all of a sudden it's like I'm not putting my money in unless like it turns into 100 million. Well, how do you get 100 billion? So how do you get that 100 billion back, right? And that's where like you have this cycle where a problem often exists, right? Because if you're trying to solve something, right, like where does the money come from to develop drought-resistant GMOs? Right now, all the GMOs are being developed by big corporations who need to make their money. They're ultimately they're stock tickers, right? Like,
But again, what's your
and
purpose? Why aren't we learning how to grow in drought conditions? Why aren't we learning how to adjust our style?
You're so right, right?
Instead of trying to
Fast
manipulate the tools to work for us. You know
The
what I mean?
solution's not in the lab.
Right, exactly.
And to your point, I 100% agree.
we
I
know
think
drought's going to come. So why aren't
there's
we
a reason a lot of the
preparing
food crops we have are pretty well evolved. I mean, there's definitely examples like the beta carotene inserts, right? Like it helps, right? But then are we equipped to prepare for the challenges? Because like, all right, you solve one. This is one thing I've found, especially with like fish, with managing ecosystems, right? Is like if you fix one thing, you create 2 problems. And so you got to ask, like, you don't even know what else comes with the production of beta carotene necessarily. It's never that simple.
Right.
You know, everything trickles from one to the next.
I did want to, just with regards to changing like farming practices, absolutely, like, you know, kind of working with what you have, but the idea of making something like more efficient, let's say, like able to use less water in its growth process, like that's just going to be universally handy. And
But
I think
again,
that there's
to Matt's point, what's the trade-off? It may
Right.
be universally handy, but we don't know what the trade-off is.
Yeah,
Sure,
what
sure.
is
You know
the
what I mean?
trade-off,
We might
right?
kill out the crop outright and trying to fix it. You know?
But
Like very concerning invasive species is what we could be creating, right?
and I think
Like stuff could run amok.
specifically the idea of like, let's say, you know, all the crops follow this like one line now, and you know, suddenly there's a vulnerability. Now if you don't have the diversity of, you know, that you get through nature, if everything is sort of like a monoculture, then the one thing that tips over the monoculture is going to be way worse.
Well, to your point, exactly. Not everything's supposed to grow everywhere. So maybe by denying Florida to be the only sole orange producer, we're losing out on naturally occurring changes to those oranges. In fact, we are now destroying oranges by all of the inbreeding of oranges that we've done. We're not going to have my kids aren't going to taste an orange that we tasted.
Right.
Oranges, I don't know if you buy oranges lately or
terrible.
you eat, or they're awful.
I had a
Citrus
good
fruit.
one. I forget what type it was. I was like, wow,
Like a
this is
Fuji,
amazing.
like a
It was-
Fuji maybe. You
I
got to go to get a
remember.
Japanese fruit.
Most of them
that they
taste
put
terrible.
pork
I
into.
got the little ones.
The mandarins, right? You know what I mean. So that's an example where we thought we were make it easier for our kids to peel at school, and now our kids
Yeah.
cannot. But now oranges suck.
Here's why
You know,
I
my
think-
kid don't want to eat oranges because they're not good to them.
That was a big thing with improving the yields, because you're not, you know, you might have more calories or whatever, but your flavor is going to be
Bananas.
diluted.
Well,
And
here's
I was
a
going to say
broader-
bananas, actually, the line of the old bananas, did
The
that die
tetraploids.
off?
Yep,
Like, I forget
yep.
all the...
That's why they're all green
So
now.
I've had like bananas in Thailand, and it blew my mind. I don't like bananas normally, and I ate them there, and they were amazing. They were so good, and I was like, it's same with strawberries, right?
Yep,
The
yep,
tetraploids,
yep.
like the octoploids. I'm sorry, they don't taste good. They lose, like, you're basically
don't have the
spreading
sugar
out,
anymore,
you know,
right.
the quality. But even with GMOs, I was thinking about just now as we were talking, and I think one of the things that scares me about it is there's a lack of coevolution. And what I mean is it's almost like we're creating the same thing as an invasive species, right? Where something takes this massive leap, and there's always competition in the natural world, right? And so if something's evolved in some place, and then all of a sudden we move it to a place, it's going to outcompete in certain areas because humans are an example.
we are the
showed up here and
determining-
knocked out all the megafauna, whereas we co-evolved in Africa to megafauna. And so it got faster and better at avoiding us, right? And then when we just showed up, the woolly mammoth, we knocked out. I mean,
Right.
we might want to fact check that, but I'm pretty sure that's true. But
That makes sense.
you get my point. Like, invasive species are a big problem, and we're kind of creating these invasive species. We're taking these massive leaps where who knows how producing beta carotene could potentially allow it to suddenly overtake a rainforest, you know?
Not everything is supposed to be grown everywhere.
Yeah.
We're under the illusion that you're supposed to be able to grow it all the same.
All right, so I'm going to give, before we
this
jump
is
into what JT's up to,
about
and the cool part is while he's working here, we can always get back to all this stuff. So, should I just keep Commander right in there? Yeah. Actually, you want to... Yeah, size. Yeah, just tiny. Yeah, that's okay. I got this. I just don't want to rip this thing loose. What are the comments? It's perfect now. All right, so finally, inducing mutations. Let's see. I just want to make sure the volume's right. Inducing mutations. Mutations can occur naturally or through human intervention, and they take many forms. Techniques like CRISPR allow precise edits to DNA, creating targeted traits, while methods like radiation exposure, as used in nuclear gardens, created developments like the ruby red grapefruit, which is ruby red grapefruit. Sorry, I always struggle saying that. Environmental stressors like drought or heat or nutrient scarcity even can lead to mutations that help organisms adapt over time. And additionally, chemicals known as mutagens can alter DNA or chromosomes, and even natural errors during cell division can result in spontaneous mutations that drive genetic diversity. These mutations can be genetic, affecting a single gene, chromosomal, involving large structural changes, or epigenetic, altering how genes are oh, dude, you're gonna rip that out, man. Yeah, I would, sorry. One sec, guys. That's cool. Sorry, this is about to get good, yeah. All right. Sorry about that, guys. Where was I? These mutations can be genetic, affecting a single gene, chromosomal, involving large structural changes, or epigenetic, altering how genes are expressed without changing DNA itself. Identifying the changes, the cause and type of mutation isn't always straightforward, and their impacts can range from neutral to beneficial or harmful. This raises important questions about how mutations occur in nature versus labs, and how we balance their risk and benefits in agriculture, medicine, and beyond. With so many ways mutations can shape life and offer benefits to humanity and Earth, how do we decide which ones to embrace and which to avoid? Sorry, we got some, I don't know what just happened here. You guys want to?
Yeah, is this the?
Yeah,
here?
let me just
I'm
put
just
it
gonna
back.
fix up the cam.
I got it the way to, oh,